iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hey, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of the iHeartPodcast speaker series. We started doing these almost 2 years ago now, where the world was moving into a new setup, if you will, into quarantine. And we wanted to keep stories and conversations going around all the incredible podcast content that we were putting out there into the world. And this has turned into my favorite part of every week, where I get to sit down with a creator, a storyteller, a podcaster, and talk about the shows they're making with iHeart, but also sort of where they come from, their origin stories, and what makes them tick, what drives them, and why they chose podcasting as at least one of the mediums they work in. So today's guest is just awesome. A few years ago, we put a podcast out there into the world called the Ron Burgundy Podcast. And it got us into a creative partnership with Will Ferrell. And out of that podcast, I think it's fair to say, Will caught a little bit of the podcast bug and liked the medium and took to it just incredibly well. And we launched a partnership with Will called Big Money Players, a new podcast network that has by now launched a bunch of shows and a lot of incredible shows. And so, Will, thank you so much for hopping on here and hanging out with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So what I love to do as part of these conversations is not just talk about where we are right now or what we're making, but like where you come from and what got you started. And sometimes it's origin stories are just super interesting because they inform a lot of the stuff that we see you make today. Right. Way back to your childhood. Was there an uncle, a sibling, a friend that you caught sight of that gave you this spark where maybe you said, oh my God, I want to do what that person's doing. They're either telling jokes or they're telling stories or they're creating, and that gave you this idea? Where did it all come from?
Sure. If I have to really kind of drill down onto, I guess, the origins of where I got to where I am now, it probably started with my parents. Both my mom and dad grew up in the same small town in North Carolina. And for anyone who lives in the South or knows anything about Southerners, they're gifted storytellers, or they like to talk. They like to, sometimes my dad takes way too long. A lot of pauses in the middle of his stories as he builds the dramatic tension. But they were just interesting to listen to. Number one, kind of had a natural ability. My dad also was a musician, so I kind of grew up watching him play, watching him perform, and in between his songs, he as a way to relate to the audience, he would tell stories or make a funny comment, and then I think as a way to be social, like kind of my inroads on the playground as a kid was to be funny. And I think at the core of humor is storytelling, and that's the way to get your point across. And it's funny. I was thinking about this topic only because in the infancy of me trying to do a bunch of different things, from sketch comedy to stand-up comedy, which I wasn't very good at. I did stand-up comedy for about 1.5 years, but one of the things, I'm not a great joke teller. I'm still not a good joke. I can't remember a joke. If you were to tell me a joke, Connell, right now, even if it was hilarious, I'd forget it by tomorrow. I'd remember like the punchline. I'm like, but wait, what? Okay, hold on. How do you get into this? My brain is not programmed. And the way I started doing stand-up, my at least poor attempt at it, was I'd have to get into a character, and I'd have to kind of set up the premise that way and then perform the joke as that character, which doesn't lend itself. It's not very efficient when you're at an open mic night and you get 5 minutes. And it would almost take my entire 5 minutes to get through one premise and one kind of story. But I realized that was kind of my strength. And that led into taking classes at the Groundlings in Los Angeles, which the backbone of what we did was to write sketches and to learn how to build that muscle, which was really, a great kind of training for when I landed on Saturday Night Live.
Did it feel like when you were on the playground or when you saw your dad tell those stories in between songs, did it feel like this kind of like secret weapon or secret power to make people laugh and build a bond with them?
Yeah, it was kind of, it was definitely a special power, to watch my father kind of relate to a room of strangers and get them to laugh or just be even that much more engaged. That was, I remember feeling like, oh, that's a very special skill to have. And that's kind of, that's kind of the thrill of doing comedy, at least when it's going well. When it's not, it's very isolating and horrible. But to walk into a room of strangers with a microphone in your hand and be able to get them to laugh at what began as your private thoughts is that's a thrilling kind of experience.
I know this is a big, broad question, but how do characters come to you? How do you decide what's a good one and what is one not to pursue?
It really is trial and error. I don't think that I usually, will just throw anything up against the wall and see if it sticks, which that's kind of why, the Saturday Night Live experience was really, being akin to being shot out of a cannon. You started on Monday, and by the end of the week, you had created a brand new show. And it was great in the sense that it didn't allow you to overthink too much. So I was constantly trying things, and it was pretty apparent whether it would work or not, either at our read through in front of the writers and the cast and the production team, or of course in front of the audience when you're putting it up on its feet at the dress rehearsal. And so I don't know if I had that, it either worked or it didn't. And I never judged myself for like, ooh, I shouldn't have tried that character. It was like, oh, well, that just didn't work. And a lot of times, there are ideas that didn't work in a certain moment, and I still held on to them because I thought there was a second life. The best example I have of that is, and I don't know if this is so much a character as it is a premise, but the cowbell sketch was something I tried earlier that season, and some people kind of laughed. Other people were like, this is weird. I don't know. But I just put it back in the drawer. And later that season, Christopher Walken was our host that week. I thought, God, I'm going to rewrite this for him. And so that was kind of reaffirming to not throw things away, to kind of keep molding them and keep thinking about them. If it has a place in your brain, we're like, no, I think this will work. So, I guess I'm saying I've always been more bullish on things working than not working.
Is it always sort of surprising what hits and what doesn't? Like the cowbell sketch, second time around just blows up. Is there always an element of like, I I didn't really know if it would work. Is that always a little bit of it?
That's what I always say. It's constantly surprising. I tend to not believe people, comedians, performers who are like, I knew it would kill. And maybe that's just my own insecurity, but I just I remember hearing Jay Leno talk about every Sunday night he would go to the Hermosa Beach Comedy and Magic Club to try out all of his jokes for that week, because as he said, because you never know. But that was kind of great too. You kind of learn to let that wash over you and to never be too precious about any one thing. And that kind of informs, a lot of the things I do in terms of process. I try not to, I have a project right now. We're just about to do the first test screening in front of an audience, and luckily everyone's very excited and we think it's going to be great. But I know that no, we just have to wait. We just have to see, because these things that we thought worked so well on the day may not. And then we also are going to find some other surprises where, oh, why did that get such a laugh?
When you put something like that in front of an audience for presumably the first time, right, in front of a big audience at least, do you take criticism well, or is it still, do you get devastated if they're not rolling in the aisles? Or have you done this for a while now and you know how to use that moment? Like, how's that moment?
I think I'm calloused enough now to where it's not as debilitating. But especially when it comes to film, you have what's called the focus group, which is they hold on to 20 people. And that's where they go in and do a more in-depth kind of Q&A. And I would stay and watch it with the audience, and I would leave for the focus group, because that's where inevitably you'd hear comments like, I usually hate Will Ferrell, but I really liked him here. Or he was kind of okay. And I would sit in the back of the room and I would just go, I don't need to hear that, because it's just better to, kind of charge through thinking that you're pretty good at what you do. But now I'm kind of, it's weird. I've kind of come through the other side, and I think I've done enough to where comments like that sometimes just make me laugh, because I'm either sitting there going, no, they were right, I don't think I was that good, or they don't know what they're talking about. So I have a thick enough skin now to utilize it as a tool, and to really see it as constructive criticism that we can either apply to the process and say, oh, we had half the people didn't understand this part of the storytelling, or we have enough experience to go, you know what, they're just wrong, and let's just stick to our guns here. And because I think in the end, this will stand the test of time.
Hey, and I think more than maybe ever this year for comedy is more complicated, more tricky, I think. And I have to imagine you being an SNL veteran, looking at what they're doing in particular vis-a-vis the world, whether it's the election or the news cycle. What is that like as a comedian? And it's a big, broad, and maybe unfair question, but in years like 2020 and 2021, is it harder than ever to make comedy, or and sort of make a call on what's funny and not funny, and how to tell that joke and how to find a way in? How do you respond as a comedian? It's not all you do, but how do you respond as that?
It's a great question. I think that a lot of I don't know how to phrase it exactly. The kind of environment we're in right now raises a lot of pertinent questions about what's right or wrong to say or comment on, or how you execute it. and so I think that is thought-provoking in a good way. But my big blanket answer is, it's not actually my job or our job to even give you an answer. It's our job to plow ahead and be governed by what our internal, kind of moral compass is, and to let the free market decide whether you want to watch me or not. I think is kind of, we still can't put, a boot on the creation of art in a way. But I think, kind of everyone's open-mindedness is providing really good discussion. I think it's kind of a blending of the two, that it's all finding a middle ground.
So back to some of the character work. Ron Burgundy, this character that's just iconic, awesome, amazing, hilarious for sure. Why, just to cut to the chase, why a podcast? How did this idea come about in your head? Maybe Jimmy Miller, maybe other folks you work with and collaborate with. Where did this come from?
Well, Jimmy and I have always talked about, wanting to. It's just been really fun outside of the two movies we've made to have Ron pop up here and there. I've done him at live events. I've, whether it's in person or on social media or this, that, and the other, and it's just always a really fun character to return to, because Ron is silly and bombastic and full of himself, and he's a kind of a great outlet to either subtly, make fun of things, be satirical in his own way, but also to make fun of himself and to be the butt of the joke. And this just felt like the kind of new frontier, the new kind of way to express Ron's opinions on things. And also too, it's super facile format, where, I remember what's been so fun about the podcast is we can tackle big news items through Ron's lens, which he usually has no idea what he's talking about. Or, I remember Andrew Harper Steele, who helps write some of the podcasts. We were pitching on ideas about, wouldn't it be fun to where there's just Ron is, I forget if it was a bee or a fly, is in the studio, and that's the premise. And we just we also did one where Ron is stuck in an elevator with people, and it just allows yourself to kind of go any direction, anytime, and it's really fun. It's just a really fun medium for that.
Was it weird to move into an audio only medium, like a highly visual performer like you, but not just you? Like Ron Burgundy's a highly visual, a visual character, and here suddenly you're like just audio. Is that weird, hard, fun, creatively free all of a sudden? Like, what do you think?
I think it's definitely a little bit intimidating at first, because you're wondering if, can we fill the time here with just talking? And, but that was the pleasant surprise, is that the time goes by really quickly. And you just learn to lean on a different kind of muscle, because you're right. There's no physicality there. There's no, there's no visual experience. So you're getting to kind of, articulate things through a different intonation in your voice, and kind of build whatever you're going to build, through the audio experience.
There's this moment, I think it's in season 1, where Ron Burgundy interviews Deepak Chopra. And while Deepak is guiding Ron and Carolina and the listener through like a guided meditation, you basically build this buffet of sound where Ron starts drinking a lot and eating anything he can get his hands on because he's hungry. Yeah. And it's like this dual track of really wonderful Deepak Chopra meditation guidance with you just eating and drinking. And you're like, this is like podcast perfection, right?
Yeah, no, that I mean, it's like getting to do, old school radio plays, Bob and Ray, and where you kind of have to, you get to create the what's going on with sound effects and all these other things. So it was really fun to kind of think differently in that way.
So you went from doing this podcast with iHeart, we jumped in, we did a season, we did a second season, and then you had this idea of launching a network, and you called it Big Money Players Network. And the idea was there were other titles that you had in mind for the name of it. I think Grandma's Record Collection was an idea. We settled on Big Money Players. And I think the idea, not to put words in your mouth, but this is how it's been borne out, is to give other people a way to launch characters, stories, podcasts of their own. And that's turned into us bringing in some pre-existing shows that we built even bigger, like Les Culturistas with Bowen Yang and Matt Rogers, or totally new shows like Carolina Barlow's show, True Romance, or POOG, which is just incredible. Yeah. And many, many more to come. We have a pipeline sort of deep into next year of shows. Is this sort of how you thought it would play out? These are my words, so I don't want to put these on you, but it feels to me like in Big Money Players Network, you are in a sense building, I think, a new kind of, maybe at first audio only, troupe of some of the funniest people in the world. And they're just starting out as podcasters, some of them. Many of them have careers already, but it's kind of phenomenal, the progress of this thing a year or two in. But I want to get your take on what you expected out of this.
Well, I can't say, I have to be, if I'm being honest, I don't think I thought, we'll start with a podcast and then this other thing will develop. It kind of, I think it was born out of how much fun we were having doing the podcast. And, to steal a page from what we kind of built at Funny or Die, which was really, it was a playground. It was a playground for funny performers, writers, directors, people to kind of come in, develop their talents, have a chance to, through short form videos, express themselves with opportunities that weren't available through film or television, and to really kind of begin to cut their teeth in a way that then would propel them on to the bigger stuff. And that was so enjoyable, and started thinking, why can't we do that with podcasts? And let's with obviously your guys' help, create a platform that will be create wonderful opportunities for all these different types of, just a broad eclectic collection of comedy voices, and it runs. We're really proud of the diversity of just the different types of shows. From Frankie Quinones' show, which is pure kind of character-driven sketch comedy, to POOG, which is two great friends just taking you on a journey for an hour, just talking about their friendship and their faults and their fears and everything like that. And it happens to be really funny and touching all at the same time. So I we just got excited about the fact that we could kind of pull in people that we see and want to give the opportunity to, and then, you know, we'll see what happens down the road. Hopefully with the development of some of these shows, are there further ideas that can spin off?
And I think just to wrap this up, I think a little bit of what we talked about, we talk about comedy and putting comedy out there in years that can be difficult or different as a race of people. It's a fearlessness that comedians need. Do you support that? I know in the comedians we bring into Big Money Players, do you see that in new comedians who are jumping into this genre and this trade, this fearlessness, this I don't really care what you guys think. It's up to you guys to judge. Are you sort of are you heartened by what you see?
I am. I mean, I think that the medium of the podcast, I mean, let's face it, there are typically so many shows that you do that you really don't have a choice but to be anything but fearless. You know, I think that's what's nice, is that they're such bite-sized chunks that you don't have to worry about, you know, to use a baseball analogy, gripping the bat too hard. You can kind of be loose with your swing, and let's have this show have this focus. We'll have this show have that focus, and this show I'm just gonna talk about underwear. There's such a freedom of the range of where you can go that it promotes that fearlessness naturally, I think.
Yeah, well, I really do appreciate the partnership, Will, with Big Money Players and iHeartMedia. It's been one of the joys of working here, has been for all of us at iHeart to work with you. It's been a whole lot of fun, but I think the best, coolest partners we have are folks who teach us stuff about the mediums that we thought we knew real well, and then we will work with somebody like you or others and realize, wow, there's a whole different way to use this too. And so this has definitely been like that. So I really do appreciate it.
Well, the feeling's mutual. It's been a blast, and more to come.
Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Means a lot to us. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you learned something. Stay safe, be well. We will see you next week.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.